The frequency that you tune to is the frequency that you will experience life through.
All we're doing is putting ourselves in this negative space and reinforcing it.
The only difference between the frequency of a thought and the frequency of a word is the fact that you can hear one and the other you can't.
Yeah. What's behind the positivity and why is your body reacting to it? I mean, why do you care?
It's because we've become numb to such a point where we can't feel things anymore. So when you're numb to such a point where you can't feel those things anymore, you also believe lies.
Wait a minute. Well, if this thing over here was true that most people don't do, what other parts of my life can I improve if I open my mind up?
Success is not how much money you make. I know a lot of people that are billionaires and they're miserable. That's not success. Success is
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. This is one of those episodes that when I say, like, this is why I do this show, this is one of those episodes, guys. I have Jason Shurka on the show today, and if you are one of those hyper-pragmatic, if I can't touch it, I don't believe it kind of people, you might hate this episode. However, I hope that you will listen all the way through because what we're talking about is how to think for ourselves, how to understand why we make decisions, and ultimately taking control of the decisions that we make on our lives on a day-to-day basis. Now, we talk through some concepts that are going to sound at face value as a little ethereal, but I got to be honest with you, these are some of the core aspects of becoming exactly who we want to be. You are going to love this episode. It is incredible. It is fun, and it is going to make you think, I promise you. I love you for being here. Guys, if you enjoy this show and you want to support what we do, hey, just share the show with a friend, right? How podcasts grow is by sharing. The discoverability on Apple, Spotify is almost zero. How new people find shows, how you most likely found this show was someone referred you to this show. So if you enjoy it, please share the show. Otherwise, enjoy this incredible conversation with Jason Shurka. Jason, dude, incredibly excited to have you on the show, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
I want to know what the fundamental laws of creation are and what was the impact after you found them and started to introduce them into your life?
It's a loaded first question. It's a big one because what we're basically talking about here is like, what is the essence of life and how do we master it? Mm-hmm. So before answering the question directly, I want to give some prefaces here to be able to make it easier to understand because I like taking the complex, making it simple because everything that's complex is simple. If we understand it in the way that a 5-year-old can understand it, if you can explain it, then you can master it. So let's take electricity. Nobody knows what electricity actually is, right? We know how it works, but like it's this energy that provides energy that we call electricity. But if you keep breaking it down, it's almost like nobody knows what an atom is. Yeah, we can identify and define an atom, but an atom then has subatomic particles. And then all of those have something sub right underneath that. And then you get into string theory, and then it keeps going and it goes and it goes and it goes. And it never ends because one of the laws, to answer your question, is the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, which is a crazy thought to think about because that means that what we're using is actually something infinite in its nature. So back to electricity, so I can give you the analogy to understand what we're talking about here. This will give you the fundamental understanding of how to master energy or, the laws of this universe and master your life. Although nobody actually knows what electricity truly is at the fundamental base of its being because it's infinite, we know how it works. And because we know how it works, we have a profession called electricians. Electricians are able to wire certain things in a way where you could take a switch, flip it, and the light turns on. We don't call that a miracle. We don't call that luck. We call that electricity, and we call an electrician when we need to do something like that. So the reason why the electrician is able to do what they do is because they've mastered not what electricity is, but how electricity works. They understand the laws. They know the difference between the red cable and the black cable. They understand how to do all these things. So now we can power our offices. We can power our homes. We can power our cities. We can power our world. Well, in that same way, just like turning the switch is not luck, but It's a result, essentially, of understanding the laws of electricity. It's no different when it comes to understanding the laws of life, the laws of the universe. So there are certain fundamental laws that when we understand them, not just in philosophy, but learn how to apply them in action, well, then we don't need to understand what energy is. We just need to understand the laws by which it works. For example, one of the laws is called the law of vibration, otherwise known as the law of resonance. So, how does a walkie talkie work? How does the radio work? It works on the law of vibration, the law of resonance. What that basically states is the vibration that you're in is the vibration that you will experience life through. So, for example, if you are hosting a radio channel, right, a channel of hip hop and country, whatever, on 107.3 FM. FM is just a frequency modulation, it's a frequency. So, you, as the owner of that channel, bought the rights to a frequency to then host your channel and your songs on. And then me as the end user uses the tuner to change through different frequencies. I would then go to 107.3 FM and I would hear Ryan's radio station and I'd be able to hear whatever it is that you're putting on that station. So what that shows us is the frequency that you tune to is the frequency that you're going to experience life through. What that means in essence in our life, to apply that in our life is, well, everything, number one, is a frequency. Joy is a frequency. Anger is a frequency. Sadness is a frequency. Disappointment is a frequency. And what I choose to vibrate on through my own emotions, through my own thoughts, through my own beliefs, through my own words, is me tuning to a specific frequency that I'm going to experience my life through. That means that if I'm focused on why does everything bad always happen to me? And why can't I ever find love? And why does every business I start fail? Well, guess what? You're literally in that frequency through your thoughts, your beliefs, your words, your emotions. And from there, the expression of that in terms of the radio station that you're tuning to is going to be your life. So now you're going to start experiencing life in a way where every business that you start is going to fail and you're never going to find your love and everything that happens to you is bad and you're this unlucky person. But the exact opposite is true as well. If you can shift your tuner, your thoughts, your beliefs, your words, your emotions, to ones that are more focused on beauty, on love, on success, on good things in life, well, guess what? You've just tuned to the radio station of life that you want to experience instead of the one that you don't want to experience. So that's just one of many different types of laws that we could speak about called the law of vibration, the law of resonance. And the way that you can prove it beyond the words that I'm saying in philosophy is with tuning forks. If I take a tuning fork, one of those things that look like a,
Yeah.
tuning fork.
Like a round Y.
It's like, exactly, a round Y. It's a perfect way of explaining it. Let's say, let's assume this is a tuning fork. Let's say this tuning fork is at 432 hertz. And let's say this is another tuning fork and it's at 500 hertz. Well, when I hit this tuning fork and it starts vibrating, this will vibrate, but nothing will happen here. Now, if this tuning fork was 432 and this tuning fork was 432, when I hit this one, even though they're not touching, this one will start vibrating. That is the law of vibration, the law of resonance. It's a science experiment anybody can do at home. The frequency that you tune to is the frequency that you will experience life through. That's one of the fundamentals of everything in life.
100% in agreement with you. Seen it play out in my own life as well as many other people that I know. And I think when we think about this concept and we apply it, because I think some people get lost for whatever reason. I think there's a bunch of reasons in ideas like vibration, right? It starts to feel like ethereal. It starts to feel fluffy, that kind of stuff. However, I try to live as much as I possibly can in reality. And what I mean by that is like looking at not what I would like to happen, not the way I wish the world worked, but how things actually work, right? And a really good data point on this, which this book doesn't reference frequencies or vibration at all, yet it explains the exact same concept, is Abigail Schreier's new book, Bad Therapy, in which she makes the case that by constantly walking through these negative experiences through therapy over and over and over again, all we're doing is putting ourselves in, now she doesn't use the word vibration or frequency, but all we're doing is putting ourselves in this negative space and reinforcing it, right?
Yes.
Like we're not helping ourselves lift out by constantly going back and rehashing bad things or bad times or bad decisions, right? Because all that does when our mind relives that experience is vibrating in that negative frequency. And I think the other place we see it is like, and it's especially for you guys at home, because Jason, I'm sure you like live this, right? But like,
Yes.
think about the moments when you were the most excited, the happiest, the most filled with joy, the most filled with love. What people entered your lives during those moments
100%.
versus the moments where you were depressed, sad, drinking, negative? What people entered your life in those moments? And it's because the people who are vibrating at the same frequencies as you are in your emotional state, they're attracted, just like you said with the tuning fork. So it's like, I want to level set that for the audience, for those of you who may get a little turned off by vibrations and frequencies. I'm a firm believer. I've also done a lot of the research as well. Not as deep as you, obviously, but I've read a lot of stuff on this. Like, this is core. And I watched a video that you did that I thought was fascinating on the Hebrew language
Yeah.
and how and maybe you could break this down. I'm going to do a disservice, but it
Sure.
seems to be in the same not to completely play on words, the same resonance as what we're discussing right now.
Let's first ground things into reality further, because I'm a man that I like empirical evidence. I like something I can touch. I like something I can see. But most people hear frequency, energy, they're like, what is that? It's like spiritual stuff. No, it's very scientific, and we can
Yeah.
you take an EKG, you connect it to your brain. When you feel sadness, it's a different frequency than when you feel joy. You can literally map it on physical technologies that we have today. So none of this, to just further enhance your point of
Yeah.
what you're saying, is something that is etherical, but it feels etherical and, mysterious because we like, touching things. But
Yeah.
even this thing that I'm touching, this cordless phone, this is made of atoms. Atoms vibrate. Atoms have a frequency. So the frequency of these atoms are going to be different than the frequency of the atoms that make up this phone. And that's just science, right? The fact that most people see it and they're like, well, how do we really understand it? How does it make sense? It doesn't make it not scientific. It just means that we need to be more educated on how science actually works. So even the first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created or destroyed. That means energy is infinite. Now, when we say energy is infinite, that sounds woo-woo, that sounds crazy. But when we say it's actually the first law of thermodynamics and it's called the law of conservation of energy, suddenly people are like, oh, okay, so that's science. So I just want to reiterate that everything that we're talking about here today is absolutely scientific. And Ryan, on behalf of your audience, whenever I say something that you're like, well, how could that be? Challenge me so I can explain the science
Yeah,
behind it in a
100%.
physical sense.
Roger that.
Now, in terms of what you're saying with the Hebrew language, take language in general. What is language? Language is sound. Sound is an expression of energy. So I'm speaking right now, I'm saying Ryan. Ryan is a sound. That sound can actually be mapped using certain technologies to be able to understand the movement and the frequency of that sound. Before we go into the language, let's go to he was actually a businessman turned scientist. His name is Dr. Masaru Emoto. He died about 13 years ago. And Dr. Masaru Emoto is famous for something called the water experiment. He had a hypothesis, and his question was, is it possible for my thoughts, my words, my intentions to impact my environment around me? And everybody looked at him saying, that's the craziest nonsense I've ever heard. There's no way that your thoughts, your words, and your intentions will ever be able to impact anything because it's just a word. Well, what he did was he took water, and I'm going to simplify his experiment, and anybody can look this online, called Dr. Masaru Emoto water experiment to actually see the findings. What he did was he took two samples of water. One sample was in a petri dish here, and the other sample was in a petri dish here. The first sample, as crazy as it sounds, he started giving a lot of negative intentions and words and thoughts. So he said, I hate you, you're disgusting, you're a nasty person, all these things. And then he went to the other petri dish and he said, I love you, you're amazing, you're a beautiful human being, all these positive things.
Essentially the premise of Ghostbusters 2.
basically.
Yeah.
And what happened was he took the water in each petri dish. One was the negative intentions and one was the positive intentions, and he froze it. And he took that frozen water and he put it under a microscope because water is made up of molecules. Those molecules have a molecular formation. So he wanted to see, does it change anything in the molecular formation, the molecular structure of the water based on how I speak to it, literally, how I think to it? Everybody's looking at him like, this guy's out of his mind. There's no way any of this can work. Well, what he found was amazing. He found over and over and over and over again that the negative intentionality water was always this distorted molecular structure in the water, and the positive intentioned water was always almost like snowflakes, coherent structures of water, beautiful structures of water that had this form of geometry to it, and nobody could explain what the hell is going on. How is this possible? So then he did it with plants. And he said, let's go to plants and let's have a lot of negative intentionality towards this set of plants and a lot of positive intentionality towards this set of plants while having everything else controlled and constant across the board. And lo and behold, the negative intentionality plants grew much, much slower, in some cases didn't grow at all, versus the one that were given the positive intentionalities, the positive words. Now people are looking and saying, okay, now we know it works, but why does it work? What is the science in terms of how that works? And the science is very simple. Your thought can be measured under an EKG as a frequency, just like your words can be measured with certain technologies as a frequency. The only difference between the frequency of a thought and the frequency of a word is the fact that you can hear one and the other you can't. But both are still frequencies. Those frequencies are made of energy, which we know exists because it's the fundamental of life as we know it. And from there, that energy will interact with other things and make changes. So when it comes to how that impacts you, and then we'll go to the language aspect of it, well, me and you are made of over 70% water. And energy, electricity, runs through that water because water is a great conductor of electricity. Now, if energy needs to move through your body for your body to remain a healthy body, if I do something that will disrupt the flow of energy in your body, we call that a dis-ease of energy, otherwise known as disease. So things like cancer, things like heart disease, things like depression and anxiety, all of those, if you go and look into those people's structures and how energy is moving in their body, there's many tools to do that. You will literally see that there are certain stagnations, there are disruptions of energy in the area that person is experiencing a hardship. If you take something called Kirlian photography, spelled with a K, it's a certain type of photography where you can actually take a picture of how energy and light is moving through the body. This is something that's been proven. It's an accepted scientific device today called Kirlian photography. Well, if you take somebody with breast cancer and you take a picture of that individual, guess what? You're going to see light all around their body moving the way that it needs to. And then if the tumor, if the cancer is in their left breast, you're going to see a lot of black there, meaning there's no energy moving there. It's a dis-ease, a disease. It's a dis-ease of light, a dis-ease of energetic flow. My point of what I'm trying to share over here is everything is energy, frequency, and vibration before it is something physical, because everything physical is made up of some form of energy. And even Nikola Tesla said that. Think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, you will understand the secrets of the universe. So to language, our words will create certain things. And the way that we know that, there was a scientific study comparing the Hebrew language, which is the Aramaic alphabet, to the English language. Now, Ryan, when I say the letter A, and I say it out loud, and I map that sound using certain technologies and devices to map that sound, it's an arbitrary shape. It doesn't really do anything. A is just an arbitrary shape. But when I say Aleph, which is the first letter of both the Hebrew and the Aramaic alphabet, and this is not a religious thing at all, this is just looking at language. Yeah. Aleph, when I shape that sound using the same devices, looks like the letter itself. Bet looks like the letter itself. That's a crazy thing. So what we find through there, if you want to get into language, is the difference between English and languages like Aramaic or Hebrew is English is a language that was created by us. It's not based on anything.
Well, it's the mutt language of the world.
Correct, but it's an
Yeah.
arbitrary language. It's not
Yeah.
based on anything that has constants to it.
Mhm.
But when you look at Aramaic and Hebrew, and you speak those languages and map those sounds out into shapes, they look exactly like those shapes. So now you're getting into the mystical side of it, but how is it that 4,000 years ago, there are languages that did things like this? And the answer is those languages are based on mathematics. Now you get into things like gematria and how each letter has a number associated with it, and each word has a certain numerical value to it, like the word life in Hebrew is chai. Chai is made up of two letters, chet and yud. When you add up those two letters in terms of their numbers behind it, you're going to get the number 18. So 18 in the Hebrew language represents the energy of life. And lo and behold, when you look at the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat, the constant electrical signal of our planet, it's 7.83 hertz. When you add 7, 8, and 3, you're going to get 18. So call it a coincidence. I don't think it's one. I think they knew something back then that we don't understand today. We see it in the building of the pyramids. We see it in things that they built back then that we don't understand today. They knew things back then based on energy, frequency, and vibration that we've simply forgotten today.
I think so much of the dysregulation of our modern society has to do with the disconnection between the ideas that you're currently sharing and, so I'm huge believer in the work of Graham Hancock. I don't believe,
Yes.
I have no idea whether what he's gotten right and what he's gotten wrong, but I think the argument that he's making has enormous merit. And the fact that more work isn't done into these ancient civilizations and cultures and the things and how they operated is insane. And the fact that when he says modern, not modern, advanced civilizations. People say, "Where's the cell phones?" And that I think speaks to the shallowness of our current world. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like I've done so much. Again, complete. I'm not a scientist. I failed out of engineering school. I do have a math degree, but that was more because I found a decent looking girl who was willing to let me cheat off her for my but you just look in your guys, look in your regular life. Like when you walk into certain rooms, why are there certain people in that room that you just like can't take your eyes off of? Or you just want to like stand around or just be near or listen to like what is it about certain individuals and the way they present themselves? And it's not always the best looking. It's not always the loudest, the most outspoken, the most disagreeable. Or there's like certain people have these aura, and when you dig in, that aura is never negative. There's never a person who comes from a negative place. Doesn't mean they don't call things out or aren't willing to make an argument. I don't mean it that way. I mean like true negativity. When you walk in a room, you can almost feel like the next time you walk into a gas station, like let your senses just kind of feel the gas station. And what's wild is you'll pick up like this cashier, she's like got a big smile on her face. And she's like, come on over. And you're like, you go. And then you look at the other guy and he's got this mopey face and he's kind of like slumped over and you could tell he's fucking miserable. You'll never go to him. You'll go to her 100 out of 100 times. And why is that our natural reaction? Well, she's positive. Yeah. What's behind the positivity and why is your body reacting to it? I mean, why do you care? You know what I mean? Like, and I guess my question for you, and take this where you want, but one, why is this a subject that two guys on a podcast have to put out into the world, right? Like, this is not, you have to search for this knowledge to find it. This is not something that is taught. It's not talked about. It is scoffed at in most kind of expert communities, unless it's specifically geared to this type of work. Like, why do you think we have turned away from this idea, like pulling it all the way back to these ideas that there could have been this ancient civilization? Like, why do we like stiff arm these ideas so much? Is it because we sometimes, like, part of me thinks that it's as surface level as we lack the ability to apply it in our day-to-day lives, so therefore we just don't give it the time? Or I'm interested in why this isn't something that people embrace more or is taught or talked about more.
I think it all boils down to something called cognitive dissonance. Now, let's look at the world that we live in right now. it's not all on us as human beings. There's also certain mechanisms and agendas that are built into all of this in order to make things unfold in a certain way. So I'll answer a few things at the same time. And this is just my opinion. I can't state it as fact, but I'll give you my opinion based on certain facts that we do know. And anybody could take it wherever they want. Let's assume that you, Ryan, were somebody that wanted to control 8 billion people. 8 billion, not just people, but people that have a lot of power within them when they can tap into that power. If you wanted to control them, but you were only like a group of 10 people or 20 people or 30 people, you know that you'll never be able to do it physically. The only way to be able to do that is to do it. And I'm not going to use the word spiritually. I'm going to use the word emotionally, psychologically, because that's the only way that you can control that many people. You need them to control themselves by you feeding them certain things. You got to be a lot more efficient and effective in doing certain things. So if you look at the world now, I mean, a lot of things don't make sense, but we accept them. And we accept them because part of the mechanism behind a possible agenda of what I'm talking about here is if there are a few people that do have certain agendas to be able to control the entire world. And honestly, like, I'm not even going to say it's my opinion because we see it in the world. We see that like the water industry and the energy sectors and oil and all of that is controlled by a few people. Yeah, we have the illusion that there are all these different corporations and there aren't even that many corporations. But factually, when you look at who owns the corporations that basically run the world, it is a small group of people, factually speaking. And those small group of people, when you have people doing things differently, for example, like finding things like free energy technology that we've been told is impossible,
Well, that's why they
well, that
killed Tesla.
yeah, well, that's a very, very, very big threat to the powers that be. And they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that that does not come to fruition. Now, whenever it's close to coming to fruition, generally the people that are coming out with these things commit suicide, right? Sometimes they commit suicide with 2 bullets in their head, which doesn't make any sense. Sometimes they, get a heart attack, or sometimes they just go missing and nobody can ever find them again. You can't prove anything, but we have brains to think and eyes to see and ears to hear. And it becomes very obvious on what's going on here and who would have such a motive with a common theme that we're seeing. Now, in the world that we're in today, if these people exist in the way that I'm implying that they do, well, it's not just, let's just feed some information to some people and hope that it sticks. It's controlling our educational curriculums. It's controlling our medical system. It's controlling our energy sectors. It's controlling our social media platforms. It's controlling the mainstream media and what's fed to people. It's controlling the advertisements that you see between all of those things. It's all the same people doing the same thing under different names and different layers of, what they're going to call themselves. But you go to the very top, you're going to see the same people doing the same thing. So what are we seeing here and why have we really been taken control of at this point in time? Now, look at our food. Our food is not food anymore. It's garbage. It's poison. It's all toxic chemicals in our food. The very fact that there needs to be a healthy section in a supermarket, what does that mean? Does that mean everything else is not healthy? And why is the healthy section so small? Why is everything filled with things that aren't natural to the human body? Now, that's just our food. Then you have our water. Our water is poisoned. It's not real, like structured water anymore. It's not water that we would drink from an actual spring. It's water that goes through a bunch of pipes that gets distorted and destroyed in terms of its structure over time. It's water that has things like chlorine and fluoride in it that are not the same chlorine and fluoride that are natural in our body, but something that was man-made. And it's something that creates issues. Now, when you add toxic food, toxic water, toxic electromagnetic radiation, because radiation in terms of EMFs is a natural thing. Everything has some sort of electromagnetic field to it. But this thing is not advanced. This is actually very primitive because this is working and creating an electromagnetic field that's actually disruptive to the body. So yeah, I may be able to call you from, the other side of the planet, but it's also giving me cancer. So the fact that we call this advanced shows that we're very primitive because they didn't have technologies in those ways that had such destructive effects to it back in the day. But they did have technologies. It just worked in a different way. So when you couple the toxic food, toxic water, toxic, dirty electricity, and everything else that we're seeing in the world that's not natural to us anymore, what it's doing is it's taking us away from our natural essence. When it takes us away from our natural essence, suddenly we become numb. We become numb. So look at birds, animals in general. They're able to feel a storm 500 miles away. We need the weatherman to tell us that. And even the weatherman, with all the technology that we've developed, is wrong 50% of the time. The reason why we need something outside of us to tell us, is there a storm coming our way, is not because that's the way that it needs to be. It's because we've become numb to such a point where we can't feel things anymore. So when you're numb to such a point where you can't feel those things anymore, you also believe lies. So when I tell you, take this thing and put it into your body that I've never tested, but trust me, because I'm the expert. Well, if I taught you from a young age to trust the experts and give your power away to authorities, that's exactly what you're going to do. My question is, what happens if those experts and authorities are paid off by certain people to share certain stories? And we know that that's the case. We've seen that being the case over decades and even centuries over the past few hundred years. So to answer your question now in the short way, after explaining that kind of long with very important, backgrounds to how we're getting to where we're getting to today, I think that we're in a very, very numb place today because we are not regular and natural human beings anymore. We're basically these chemical things that are just walking around with toxicity in our bodies 24/7. And until we can correct that and rebalance our own bodies and rebalance and reoptimize our own health, we're going to stay in this place until we can change that.
I had this moment the other day. I was listening to a podcast, and one of the major health guys, Huberman or a TR, I can't remember which one it was,
Yeah.
right? And I like those guys. I think they're trying hard to share a good message, and this isn't negative anyway. But the podcast host asked them, like, if someone could do, you know, 3 things to feel better that were easy and inexpensive, what would they do, right? And the first thing they said was, see the sun as early as possible and maybe take a walk in nature. And I like thought to myself, and I'm like, how sad is it that we've gotten to a place as in a society where I have to tell you as a top tier premier expert to go outside and see the sun as a way to feel better. Like I have to tell you that. Like it's not just I go outside and I feel the sun on my face and like that's part of my day and my life. Like I literally have to be told that is a health hack to go outside and disconnect,
Well,
right? Like
we're also at a time now where we've been taught that it's the opposite of health. Stay away from the sun. It's going to kill you and give you cancer. What kind of nonsense is that?
yeah.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. If that were true, then people with skin cancer would be highest closer to the equator. That's not the case. The highest levels of skin cancer are actually furthest from the equator. So it's like, it, to your point, because I agree with everything that you're saying, we've come to this point because the exact opposite is what we've been brainwashed with. So you need to start sharing the fundamental simple principles once again. But I agree with you. It's crazy that somebody that's as high level as that needs to tell you something as simple as go and see the sun. But remember, we're living in a world where we've been taught that the sun kills you and gives you cancer. So I'm not surprised, but it's very sad.
Yeah, I did a TEDx talk in February, and the topic was I call it the status trap, right? And how uh, my belief is, and it's why I do this podcast, and it's why I love having individuals like yourself on the show, is because there are so many people in my life that I love. I just adore who they are. But when I talk to them about the way that I think, they look at me like I'm a crazy person. And you know what I mean? They're like, oh, Hanley, he's into conspiracy theories and he's got all these things he does. And like right over here, just outside the screen is a cold plunge and I have a sauna and, that and like every morning I get up and I get in this freezing cold water that I absolutely hate for 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how much willpower I have that day. And then I get out and I go in this sauna and that's my 30-minute routine every morning to get myself going. And people be like, oh, you're crazy for doing that. Why do you?
Right.
And I'm like, bro, like we got to start thinking for ourselves. Like the reason that I do this show and I bring in even though we tend to be skewed towards business professionals and how people can improve that side of their life, I mean, dude, I have people from all over the spectrum come on the show because to me, no matter what your goal is, to get there, you have to think for yourself. It doesn't mean some of the things you do won't be common practice things that other people do, but do those things because you decided to do them, right? If you're going to lather your body in this intense chemical called sunscreen, right, as a way to defend yourself from cancer from the sun, right, which people have been dealing with forever, like if that's what you're going to do it because you made the decision, not because everybody around you is like, if you don't put, 10 layers of SPF 80 on, you're going to die from skin cancer, right? Like if you want to do that, do it, but do it for your reasons. Do it because you thought through the cost benefit analysis or however your body reacts to the sun or whatever, and make that decision on your own, right? And you have this concept, like escaping from the matrix, right? And I think sometimes people again get a little like this is, the Matrix, oh, it's a movie. That movie was fucking groundbreaking for a reason, right? It was groundbreaking for a reason because what it did, it was the first shot across the bow and a rare shot from Hollywood to say there is this layer of society trying to put you in a box that you don't see, but it's there. And if you're willing to open your mind, you can see it. And once you start to see it, the hard part, and I this is what I say to my friends who bust my chops about being a conspiracy theorist, even though, I now remind them that I was accurate about 90% of the things that I was talking to them about. But like, I once you start to see these things, even if it's in one micro part of your life, it's like all of a sudden you start going, wait a minute. Well, if this thing over here was true that most people don't do, what other parts of my life can I improve if I open my mind up? So like for you, this idea of like, how does someone who's listening to this, who's just kind of a straightforward, maybe we'll call them hyper practical person who wants to be successful, but maybe struggles to come into this area that we're going, how does that individual start to open up their mind, start to see the matrix and start to maybe, I think of original thinking as not as like being some type of contrarian for contrarian purposes. To me, it's just taking ownership of your life, right? That's all that I hope people do is just take ownership for your life. Just be responsible and purposeful in the decisions that you're making. And then what happens, happens. So like for you, someone who's gone this deep on this many topics, like how does someone start to crack that window?
So you used a term called escaping the matrix. I never want to escape the matrix.
Okay, I like that.
I want to master it. Because why would you, I mean, escape it? Why would you want to leave the game? This is a great game. Just master it. Master it. Know that there's something beyond it, but play the game, master it, and have a great time while you're playing it. So I like, creating a distinction between those two because, outside of the very practical, straightforward people, which I consider myself one of those, and I can connect with the people on the other side of the spectrum as well. I can connect with all parts of that spectrum in terms of understanding where people are coming from and how they see the world. So for people on the other side of the spectrum, before I answer your question, there are a lot of people in that, conspiracy theory community. And it's not, a theory is something you can't prove. And when it's a fact, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It may be a conspiracy, but a theory is not a fact, and a fact is not a theory. So just to make the distinction
Yeah.
between those two. But yes, I think it's very important never to escape the matrix. It's to understand how to master it. And to understand how to master it, you have to understand the laws by which it works. If you understand the laws by which it works, it's almost like if life is a game of chess, you don't want to exit the game. You just want to know the rules and checkmate every second you can. You know what I mean? Because that's a master chess player. It's exactly how it works. So now to answer your question about that kind of straightforward person, number one, having an open mind is very important. Not because what we're talking about here is not backed by empirical evidence, but it is working on a different model of thought than the way that we were taught to think. Because look at schools, right? Look, I am very, very against college, and I'll tell you why. Unless you are going to either be a doctor or a lawyer or something that you actually need to go and study something specifically, I'm against it. And I'm against it because they don't teach you how to be a boss. They don't teach you how to be a leader. They teach you how to be a slave. They teach you how to be an employee. That's how it's structured, because the people behind those educational systems are the same people that run everything else we just spoke about. They're the ones, the Rockefeller Foundation are the ones that made the curriculum for medical school. And they're also the ones behind a lot of the big pharma companies that give the physician's desk reference, which is a big book every single year that they give out to doctors, basically being a dictionary of every single ailment and every drug to give, turning doctors into drug dealers, not doctors. So that I have a problem with. Now, for the straightforward person that just says, like, how do we kind of understand all of this in a very understandable and straightforward way? And to do that, the first thing we have to do is stop counting on other people to tell us what's true and what isn't. It's okay to hear what an expert or an authority figure has to say. But if you don't cross-reference and double-check that, you're not a straightforward person. You're a follower that has no sort of, way of explaining something on their own behalf. And if you have no way of explaining something on your own behalf, who are you? You're not you. You're just what everybody else told you that you should be. So being that, the focus on this is very business oriented and all that, it's all the more reason to have your own personality. Now, to your point of what you said, Ryan, if you did your own research on sunscreen and you decided that from your own research, this is the best thing for me, I respect your decision, because you have a reason as to why you're doing it when I ask you. And that same type of personality is what is extremely important and necessary if you want to run a successful business. If you want to run a successful business, if you want to have a successful operation, then not only is successful financially, because that's not the only measure of success. Success is not how much money you make. I know a lot of people that are billionaires and they're miserable. That's not success. Success is, sure, how much money are you making, but how much value are you creating for the world? How are you impacting the world around you? How are you making this world a better place? And if you can have a balance of both of those things, then you're a successful person. But I don't know anybody that's gotten to those levels on both sides of the coin that doesn't have their own opinions from their own research of understanding why they do what they do. That's the difference between a leader and a follower. A follower cannot run a business, cannot lead a very successful business. A leader can. And a leader has the traits that we're talking about here. Now, everything that we're talking about may sound crazy, but it's also straightforward if you break it down to understanding how we got there. My greatest recommendation is, no matter how crazy something sounds, even if you completely disagree with it, and I'll give you an example. I've spoken to people that think the earth is flat. I don't think the earth is flat. But when I spoke to those people, I didn't just say the earth isn't flat. I asked them, why do you believe the earth is flat? I want to understand your reasoning, because if you have such this great motivation and passion behind that, you must have a reason for having it. So I heard that. And when I heard it and I did my own research, I came down to my conclusion of, I don't think it's flat. Now, that's the same thing that I'm explaining over here. You may hear what sounds to you as the craziest thing in the world. But if you dismiss it, no matter how crazy it sounds, before understanding why that person came down to their conclusion, you're doing yourself a disservice. Whereas if you did start asking the question, you may understand one of two things. It really is crazy and it's not for me. Or it is straightforward and I just couldn't see it because I was coming from a different way. And I can guarantee everybody watching this right now, if they listen and hear the very things that we're speaking about, the things that your friends call conspiracy theories, and say, you know what, how did they get to that conclusion on this specific topic? Well, the deeper you look into it, you may find yourself understanding that it's a lot more straightforward than you thought it was.
I struggle with modern leftist value structures. Okay, I struggle with it. And it struggled with it for years. Because again, as I said before, like, I try as much as I can to live in the world and look at what actual results come out of ideas and make my decisions on whether I believe or disbelieve something based on not a utopian belief of what the world could be if we just disintegrated human nature and the universe and all the things we're talking about, right? Like, if we actually live in, and I struggle with it for a very long time. And then about 2 years ago, like halfway through the Biden administration, I have these thoughts on what their thoughts are, but I've never actually spent time because I listen to them for 5 seconds and I get frustrated. I'm going to purposefully start to take in their commentary and force myself, despite maybe some initial rejection, to hear what they're saying and where they're coming from. And what I found really interesting was 2 things. One, most of it I continued to disbelieve, and disagree with. However, my what I started to be able to discern, and by listening to the opposition or listening to viewpoints that I didn't necessarily agree with at face value and digging into them a little deeper, was that I found I actually started to believe there's 2 types of people who believe this. One type is someone who honestly wants to do good and for whatever reason has been indoctrinated by these ideas, most of which are socialist, right? And they tend to not live in reality, but they want to do good. They actually are good-hearted people who want to do good. And frankly, I'd put like AOC in this category. I think the shit that she says is absolute bananas. I do not think she lives in the real world. However, I do think that she is trying, based on the fact that she's been indoctrinated with socialist beliefs, to do good. I think she's trying to do good. I think there are others who you would position near her who are doing it for reasons more like what we talked about, to either, form their own NGO and funnel the money back into them or gain some sort of power, or they're looking for celebrity or whatever they're looking for. So that's why they go there. But what I found from that was it helped solidify my own beliefs more by spending time with ideas that I didn't necessarily agree with at face value. And now I feel like I have a little more empathy and understanding for the other side. I also feel even more solid in the viewpoints that I originally had in the places where those are. And my purpose in saying that is now I can listen to someone who it was practice for listening to someone who I disagreed with, to both open my mind up to new ideas that could be true, right? Maybe there's something that she's saying that 5 of these things she said I disagree with and I think are wrong. But however, 2 of the things she says, like she has this big thing she's going on around, and I'm just using it as some microcosm, guys. I'm not trying to be
Sure.
like, I think she's got this whole narrative that congressmen and anyone in Congress or any of these, they shouldn't be allowed to trade stocks. Shouldn't be allowed to trade stocks, right? I think it's a phenomenal idea. I 100% unequivocally agree with her. They should be able to invest in the market, but it should be 100% transparent. It should be in like the S&P 500 for the 4 years or 6 years or 2 years that you hold this position. You have to put all your stuff in one S&P ETF or whatever, and that's where your money goes. And now you can't do these trades. So I think that's a phenomenal idea. Well, if I had just turned her off completely because at face value I disagreed with where she was coming from, I wouldn't have found this idea that someone like herself, that we're in complete lockstep on, right? And I think that allows us, going back to this idea of thinking for ourselves, of owning our lives, if we only live in the bubble that we were kind of initially indoctrinated in our childhood or our early 20s, we never actually grow as people. We don't start to find these new ideas. Like if you're completely turned off to anything that isn't what you would consider material or real, then you miss this idea that we started with, of resonance, of vibration, and how important that is. And how, if you want to, I struggle, not me personally, but I have, I'll be talking to some founders or some entrepreneurs sometimes. And a lot of times, particularly the guys in these spaces, although I know it to be true for the women as well, they struggle to find a good partner. And it's because they're constantly in problems and constantly grinding. At the end of the day, they're kind of tired and they have this mission and they're working hard, but they find themselves in this negative place at the end of the day, just from the nature of a startup or whatever, right? I mean, it's freaking hard. So then they're like, well, why can't I find a good partner? And it's because when you go out to wherever you go, the bar or the community event or whatever, at the end of the day, you're fucking in a bad spot. Like, you're bitching about what happened that day. You're complaining about an employee or a lost client or something what person is going to be attracted to that, right? Now, you may say, well, they're being I'm just being real. But if you miss this idea of vibration, right? If you miss this idea of resonance, what you're saying, and I obviously 100% agree with you, is that you're vibrating at a negative frequency is only attracting other people who are also vibrating at a negative frequency. Those are going to be the people that want to stand in that circle and listen to you bitch about whatever you're bitching about. If you come to that same circle and you're positive and uplifted and joyful in some capacity, that's the type of person that you're going to attract into your world.
But now the question is, how do we change? And I'm going to give a solution here as well. How do we change from something that's real? Like I have those days, and at the end of the day, you're like, I'm tired, and I don't want to deal with this. And thank God I have an amazing partner, and I got past that part. All right, but let's say I didn't, and I know what it's like not to have it before I had her, and what I found was, because it's great to say, if you're just going to be negative and all this all the time, it's not going to work for you. But that's just the problem. What is the solution? And the solution that I found, and I'm sure one of many, but I'm sharing this hopefully because it can help others. It's your mentality and your perspective and your relationship with the situation itself. So what I found is by changing one word in a question that I'm going to share with you right now, changed everything for me. I used to say, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Why is this person doing this? Why is this person doing this? Why is this not working the way? Why is this happening to me? And I'm like, well, wait a second. Based on my understanding and the fundamental laws, that one of them is the oneness of everything. Literally everything is connected to everything, whether we like it or not, whether we understand it or not. Energy is connected to all other energy, regardless of time and space. And I said, okay, if everything's connected to everything, then just like in my body, if I wouldn't take a hammer and break my own leg, because why would I do that? Then why would this oneness, call it whatever you want, do something to hurt itself? And that would be an impossibility. So that inspired me to change my question. I said, instead of why is this happening to me, I started asking, from that understanding, how could this be happening for me? And that changed everything. Because suddenly I started finding the beauty in the hardship. Because the hardest times are where you learn all these things, really. When you have that shitty employee, or you have that person that screwed you over in business and stole a lot of money, or you have that person that's lying and doing all this, or you have, this campaign that's not working, or whatever it may be. Yeah, it's shitty, but it's also a great opportunity, because you just got one step closer to making it work. The first thing you have to do is say, okay, it doesn't work. Now I know what doesn't work. I just got what I gained by something not working is learning one more thing not to do, which is amazing, because that brings me closer to one more thing that I could do. Your relationship with a specific situation changes the situation itself. And by changing that one word from 2 to 4, instead of why is this happening to me, but why is this happening for me, changed everything, because I started being able to find the beauty that I wasn't looking for before. And if I'm not looking for it, I'm not going to see it. Just like that game Banana, when you're on the road, finding the yellow car. You've never seen a yellow car on the road, but if me and you were on a road trip and I say, Ryan, let's play a game. The first one to find 5 yellow cars on the road wins. Suddenly, you're going to find 5 yellow cars on the road, probably within a day or two, because you're paying attention to it. So what you're paying attention to, what you're looking for, is what you're going to find. If you look for ugly, you're going to find ugly. If you look for beauty, you're going to find beauty.
To make David a king, God did not give him a crown. He gave him Goliath. That changed my entire vantage point. I read that 7 years ago, and it changed my entire perspective on how I approached adversity.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's if you can look at these things as ways to get stronger. Dude, I'm so glad that you shared that, because I could not agree with it more. And I love the way that you put it. This is one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn in my life, because, I grew up poor. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, in the woods, town of 900. We used to say you could leave the doors open at night because the criminals lived in our towns. They didn't steal in our town, right? So no opportunity. Every male role model they had growing up was either an alcoholic, a pothead, or worse. And I had, I was, I consider it a blessing from God that I had a mindset of I need to get the fuck out of here, right? For whatever reason, at 12, I can remember distinctly at 12 walking around my town, I need to get out of here.
Yep.
And but I still had that relationship to why was I put in that spot? Why? And then I read that quote, and then others passed, and it changed my entire perspective to say everything that could normally be classified as a terrible event or a negative event, I now look at as this is a lesson that for some reason the universe or God or whatever you believe in has decided I need to learn in order to make me stronger. And it changes your whole vantage point. Jason, dude, I could talk to you for hours, bro. This is freaking phenomenal. I appreciate the hell out of you. For people who want to get more into your world, who want to follow along on your journey, who like your ideas, where do they go? How do we get them involved in what you're doing?
So I have several different projects. My main one right now, kind of two main ones that do interconnect. One is focused on health wellness, which I would really, really recommend for everybody, no matter how old or young you are, because if you optimize yourself, you could do a whole lot better in this world. So that one is unifiedhealing.com, UNIFYD healing.com. To find a wellness center near you, we have over 500 around the world in 50 countries. So there's definitely one near you somewhere. And the other aspect of what we do is unified TV. So think of it as a conscious and really awesome version of Netflix. Instead of just entertainment, we talk about things like this. There are shows about things like this. So that's Unified TV, UNIFYD.TV. It's an app on all smart TVs and smartphones as well. And we have tons of people, big community all around the world there as well.
Yeah, also tremendous Instagram follow as well. And we'll have links, guys, to everything Jason just mentioned. Just scroll down, whether you're on YouTube or Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening. Just scroll down. We'll have links to all this stuff. Dude, open invitation to come back. I could talk about all this shit. I could have talked about the ancient history stuff for another hour. This is great. I love your viewpoint, and I'm so happy that you could give us some time today.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me. And I'd love to stay in touch.
Yeah, sounds good, dude.